Welcome to Midday Australia. Today, the new movie superstar of Shirley Valentine, Pauline Collins. Recording legend Cliff Richard, John Michael Howson from Hollywood, Aboriginal...
Half of Australia's waiting for this particular segment. Back in 1959, Britain's answer to Elvis was melting the hearts of his millions of fans with smouldering good looks and sensational singing talents. 30 years on and some 78 million records later, 78 million records, the original young one, Cliff Richard, is back stronger than ever. And he's joining us from the Burswood Casino on the eve of his 9th Australian tour. Would you please welcome Mr. Cliff Richard? I'm just getting a round of applause. Welcome, Cliff. Nice to talk to you again. I've got to tell you that we had more phone calls and more letters about this interview than anything we've done in about the last 5 years. So Aussie fans of yours are obviously devoted.
Yeah, you know they have. I've discovered that over the years, here and in New Zealand too. I always say they were loyal, and they are loyal, but I mean, it is different. It's a very, very staunch loyalty, and I really appreciate it, I tell you. Interesting seeing that workout that we are in the middle of a workout at Burswood with you, but there was something that when you finished at Wembley, the concerts last year, with I think 72 or 74,000 people turning up, you said, if I can quote you correctly, this is a grand slam way of finishing off 30 years, saying, okay, that's the final celebration. Now let's get on with the next 30 years. Yeah, actually, what I said was, let's get on with the next 30 minutes. I don't know. There's no guarantee anymore in our industry. Well, I guess there never has been. And so 30 has been a fantastic time as far as I'm concerned. But for me, it's really important to look forward. I think too many people kind of revel in the past, and I've never been like that. And I think, you know, Ray, that's probably the reason why I'm still around. I'm still around at a contemporary level. I find myself in the charts all over Europe and in the Middle East and way out here in Australia and New Zealand, rubbing shoulders with Michael Jackson and Madonna and George Michael and all the others. And it's because I don't stay in the past. I like to keep forging ahead. Again, you've said that the rock and roll is a middle-aged art form, not only for 18-year-olds. It certainly is. Well, you know, rock and roll is about, it must be getting on for 35, 40 years old. And so therefore, in itself, just because it's been around that long, it is definitely a middle-aged art form. But really also what I mean is that those of us who have now hit 40s and 50s, we started... You're not quite 50 yet, are you? No, not quite. I'm 50 in October, but I reckon if I tell everybody I'm 50 now, I'll spend a whole year and a half at the same age. Again, looking last night, I mean, we've talked several times in the past, but I'm reminded when I go back over the files, and I need to remind you, I mean, it's an extraordinary... In Britain, 78, around the world, 78 million copies of records you've sold, second only to Elvis in terms of albums, second or third to Elvis and Sinatra. It's an extraordinary record of success. But why do you think it is? Why have you succeeded? I don't know. It's really hard to be self-analytical. I've always found that very difficult. But I guess it's because I've always stayed true to what I am. I like my music. I like what I do. I think I'm quite good, and I've stuck with it. I've never tried to prove myself to anybody else. I often get very, very encouraging letters from, for instance, from guys who are dragged into my concerts by either their wives or their girlfriends, and they're really surprised that I do a rock and roll show. I don't know what they expected, but if they come along, then I accept them into the fold and say, great, if you want a good evening out, come and see me. But I've never gone out of my way to go and get them. Do you know what I mean? It's a waste of our time. If people who like me will come to one of my shows, and I will give them 150%, and they'll go away, and the next time they'll come back. So I reckon that's one of the reasons why I've been around. I've remained true to my love for rock and roll and pop music and the way I present it, and I've stuck with that line all the way. Not sort of forged into any strange direction. Is it true as well, Cliff, that back in those early days when for a brief time you were a bad boy, that in fact girls would bring their boyfriends to the concerts and the boyfriends would throw things at you because they were so upset? Yes. I always think that the Shadows and I, we had it really sewn up certainly in Europe and possibly even over here in Australia too. And that is because the girls came to scream at me and all the guys came to watch Hank Marvin. So, you know, between us we had full houses all the time. But yes, I mean, there was a time, of course, when rock and roll was very new and the media were building up the whole thing about sex symbols. And naturally, if you're a guy and you're out with your girlfriend and she's doing nothing but scream at some other bloke, you're going to get slightly cheesed off. But I'm glad those days have gone. I think people have grown up now and realized that, you know, everything is in terms of, is built up in terms of entertainment. And if some girl wants to go woo-hoo-hoo, scream, the guy just nudges, smiles and says, that's it. She'll never meet the guy that she's screaming at. So there's no threat anymore, and I think that's really good because it's now left me free, not to worry about whether I'm going to get a bottle in my face when I come out the stage door, but just left me free to perform to the best of my ability. Do you still have, are there still hordes of what used to be called groupies at your concerts?
I guess groupies, no, I'm not aware of seeing hundreds of groupies at my concerts.
What about in the early days? I mean, you're old enough now to be honest about this. I mean, the early days when you were a young bloke and footless and fancy-free totally, did you ever play around with the groupies?
No, I never did.
You didn't?
No, they were always around and always available, but I had a very fortunate childhood, and I really think it's helped me in good stead. I didn't want to do anything that might shame me in front of my mum or my dad, and so therefore I was really very cool. Far cooler than all those folks that thought they were being real cool and hip, you know. Most of those people have ended up in divorce courts and goodness knows where, but that's not for me.
I guess that, I mean, I know that you object, rightly so, to the image of being bland and being the goody-goody, but you were really unconventional in the sense that, certainly in the 60s, when you decided to become a Christian and you were outspoken about it, I mean, all the experts were saying, well, that's the end of Cliff Richard.
Yes, it's strange. I can never quite understand why that should have happened, why somebody bearing their soul should actually be considered strange, and therefore that's going to be the end of their career. In fact, what happened was that very year that I made the public statement, I went and did a pantomime at the London Palladium, and we broke all box office records known to the Palladium up until that time. So I knew from that stage that my faith and my presentation of it was not going to be a stumbling block for me. And that people, as I mentioned earlier, people are grown up, you know. They know that we're all human beings, that we all have faults, we have our good points, and we just got to let them merge together and get out there. And so no one, I don't think, expects anything too much from any of us anymore. At least I'd like to think they don't expect too much of me. I don't place myself up as anything. The media do tend to class us as certain individuals. That's why I'll get the goody two-shoes image, whereas none of them will ever quote me when I say to them. I guess because they can't spell it.
We just quoted you. We just quoted you. Tell us briefly, I mean, what's the difference of Cliff Richard this time round to last time in Australia?
Oh, well, I'd like to think that when the folk come to see the show, they're going to see a massive difference. I think that what I've done is this time, I've given the show a fantastic breadth, and it's merely by adding bodies, really. I have picked up some dancers from Melbourne, and they're really excellent. I'm saying that now because they're behind me, and I daren't say anything else. But we'll have a private interview a little later. No, but they're really fantastic, and what it does is it gives you a chance to move about on stage so that people have, you know, there's this massive experience, not just one solo focal point. So I've added that, and of course I have a magical lighting rig that has its own show all by itself. And so I think people will be, again, hopefully pleasantly surprised that we've been able to come back and do something quite different. And there's what I'll do next year, Ray, I have no idea.
There's also some young singer, some bloke named Cliff Richard, who's going to be singing out there as well, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, you're kidding. You can't keep me off the stage. That's my problem. I'm 50 and working harder than I ever worked before. Oh, no. No, there's no way. I never allow the dancers to be on their own. They're too good and they could steal the thing, so I always front it.
All right. Starting up in Burswood this weekend?
I'm at the Perth Entertainment Centre, yeah, starting tomorrow, in fact, for a couple of days, and then we move on to Adelaide.
All right. And everywhere, in fact, check the newspapers. Cliff's here for almost a month, most of March, and finishing up in Darwin, where it rained last time. We hope it doesn't rain this time. I know it's a tight schedule. We would love to see you in the studio if you get a chance in Sydney, Cliff, but either way, we wish you well.
Thanks a lot, Ray.
Thanks, Cliff. Would you please thank Cliff Richard for it? After break, Mark McLeod tells us all about the world.